Hey guys, today we're looking at some 1v1 tips in the ZenGaming arena and how the knowledge you learn and practice there can translate to your actual games. We're going to touch on the importance of not overexposing yourself, movement and positioning, predictability, when you're low on HP, as well as some other things. We then look at how these tips apply in real games, such as when you and your opponent are the last people alive, or it can be when you're entering or holding an angle so you're trying to take that one-on-one fight, or even when you're clutching, because a clutch essentially boils down to a series of 1v1 fights where you let your opponents make the mistakes and then you punish them for it individually. So these tips are going to help you in all those situations. So back to the arena. First of all, an important tip is to not overexpose yourself. This is easier when you know your opponent's position, but until then, make sure you're only open to a couple positions so that 1, they can't shoot you without you seeing them, and 2, they can't shoot you without you aiming at them as well. For example, here I've spawned and I'm looking out to the left of this box, so it's likely they'll try to peek 2 at the start, and so if they're over here, I'm going to see them straight away. If they're not, neither of us are going to know where the other one is yet, so I'll try and move and aim at a different angle and wait a bit until we find each other. But the important thing is I won't overextend so that they see me without me really looking at where I think they are. You don't want to move out too far from your cover like this, as then you're exposing yourself to way too many angles, and although you'll find each other quickly, most likely you're also going to die quite quickly. This tip is always important to remember, but especially when you don't know where the enemy is, so it's akin to clearing angles, as you're effectively clearing the positions they could be in. Just try to expose yourself to as little as possible at almost all times, and you should be fine. So now let's touch on movement. The key to an arena 1v1 is to move a lot, changing positions as much as possible between the trade of bullets. Also, try to move between favourable positions, while keeping an eye on where your opponent could be. A position that changes your elevation quickly can be beneficial for you to make it harder for them to hit your head, though it also requires you to adjust your own aim. Ultimately, you want your opponent to be always guessing where you are and where you're going to appear next, to make it harder for them to aim where you are, and you also want to be keeping track of where your opponent is so that you can keep pre-aiming where he's likely to peek. Similarly to this, some players become very predictable, and you can learn their pattern after a few rounds. Some will peek and re-peek the same corner, often at the same intervals, while others will always move to the other side of their cover, and being predictable like this allows you to pre-fire the position they're moving to, so they run straight into your bullets. If you're finding it impossible to peek without dying, most likely you're playing too predictably, and you just need to shake things up. When you have high HP, you can be unpredictable by wide peeking to catch players off guard, and generally do some more wacky stuff if you're feeling confident. However, when you're low HP, you should be looking to only peek headshot angles. This means your opponent needs to land a headshot on you, effectively removing the disadvantage of low HP that you have. You should almost never wide peek or play in off position when you're low HP, as just a single shot anywhere could kill you, and the goal is just to make it as hard as possible for your opponent to finish you off. This leads nicely into shooting, specifically tapping, bursting, and spraying. In a 1v1 arena, you're almost never close enough to warrant a full spray. Instead, you'll look to tapping or short bursts to kill your opponent. If you miss his head but hit his body a few times so he's going to be on low HP, you still shouldn't spray, but you can make your bursts a bit longer in the hope of hitting that stray body shot. From this as well, we need to remember that if players have head armor on the map, then the AK is going to kill in one headshot, but the M4 is going to take 2, so you almost always want to use an AK with head armor. If there's no head armor, the M4 has a tighter spray pattern, especially on the initial shots, and so is often the better choice. This is of course preference, but it's highly advised. Finally, my last but possibly most important tip is emotion. Exhilaration, panic, frustration, adrenaline, they're all things that we experience, and the key to a successful 1v1, both in the arena and real games, is putting them aside and thinking clearly. Panic kills your spray, and adrenaline gives way to greed, frustration causes mistakes, and all of which could lose you your moment of glory. So the key is, try to keep calm, think clearly, and just remember what you've learned. So let's go on and look at how these tips and your arena practice can apply in a real game situation. We discussed not overexposing yourself at the start of the video. This is important in games to limit the number of engagements you take at once. If one gun is shooting at you, you will die a lot slower than if 3 guns are shooting at you. It's also the basis of clutches, and forcing your opponent to engage in a series of 1v1s is how you win those clutches. Let's start by taking a look at overpass middle. If I stand here, I'm going to be exposed to underground, stairs, and party all at once. However, if I fall back a little bit, I can hold underground and the middle push from here, and I can hold party and toilet push from here, ultimately changing from 3 angles down to 1, which is a much easier hold as you won't even need to move your crosshair, they're just going to walk straight into it. Next we spoke about movement and ultimately positioning. In 1v1s or clutch situations, you have a huge advantage if the opponent doesn't know where you are. Here's a fantastic clip from Fallen where he manages to get behind the T's on cobblestone without them realizing. He then forces them into 2 1v1s and ultimately wins the round. We can see how much of an advantage we can get when the opponent doesn't know where we are, as they have many more angles to check and area to watch. And when they know where you are, none of that matters anymore, and all of their crosshairs are just going to be straight on you. So an important tip to remember is when the enemy team doesn't know your position, make sure you achieve a lot when you reveal it, i.e. get a kill from it. Too often I see players throw an awkward flash or an optimistic nade and it has incredibly little impact, but immediately gives away their position to all of the opponents. This single flash often kills a clutch in its tracks, yet it happens so often. So remember, when you're breaking cover, make sure it's because you're doing something impactful, like getting a kill. And again, in real matches, predictability is a factor to consider, though this time it is team-wide. If the CTs always have an identical setup that doesn't change during the round, then the Ts are going to have a much easier time knowing where to go. The same applies for rotates. If players always rotate through the same areas at the same time, they can easily be cut off and killed or exploited for a fake on the other side. Try to shake up your game, especially when things aren't going your way. The low HP tips especially apply in real matches, and you should always try to play either a headshot angle or a passive angle when you're on low HP. A headshot angle is going to allow you to remain as effective as your full HP friends and continue to make an impact on the round, while a passive angle allows you to gather information for your team and potentially catch the opponents off guard. What you don't want to find yourself doing is wide peeking or playing an off angle where you're completely exposed and just dying because you were low HP. That makes you completely ineffective for the rest of that round and just throws away any potential that you had. Finally, emotions. CS is a team game, and one strong emotion from one player can disrupt every other player on that team. Often, the difference between a win and a loss, or even just your enjoyment of the game, is morale of the team. If you're feeling good, you're thinking more clearly, and you're much more likely to make that clutch, and you'll be more composed and focused. Just take a deep breath, stay calm, and focus. So that's all the tips for today. I hope you found this video useful, and keep these tips in mind when you're playing your next arena match or securing that epic clutch. As always, thanks for watching.